All right, thank you very much, Tom. And yeah, moving on to the submitted questions then. The first one comes from an anonymous colleague. I'm not sure who they're referring to here, but they say a member of the senior management team has suggested that there is a desire in NHS Grampian to achieve an egalitarian work culture. They've said, firstly, what does that actually mean? And secondly, do you think we have or will ever achieve it? And then they've said, lastly, is there any chance that we can get back to speaking plain English? I don't know. I'll try and direct these to people that I think might be appropriate, but if either of you want to jump in, feel free. I don't know, Caroline, is that one that you might want to address to start with?
So I think
Or,
getting back to speaking plain English is a really good thing, and that's never done. Using words such as egalitarian is never done with the intention of uh, causing confusion. And it definitely wasn't me because I struggle to say that word actually. So I think what we are looking to achieve is an empowered. What does that even mean, Caroline? So we are looking to achieve an organisation where people feel safe at work, they actually have some fun at work, they own the work that they do, and they understand their contribution to the bigger picture and feel as if they make a difference. So if that fits under the word of egalitarian, then that certainly as the chief exec what I'm aiming for. But Tom will come in with probably a much more refined answer to that.
Well, I'm smiling because I know that the term egalitarian work culture features in my LinkedIn profile, and we do like a bit of management speak within LinkedIn. So there you go. But I did also actually hear a colleague using the term recently, so I've been trying to remember there who it was, but I can't. So I'll share what I think it means anyway. And I mean, I totally agree that kind of plain English is where we need to be and helping people to understand. So for me, I suppose it's about an organization or workplace where people kind of are equally respected. Banding, grade, profession doesn't kind of give somebody a sort of give somebody one person preference over another, and that people feel actually that they've all if we I guess apply ourselves in the right way, we've got an equal chance of getting on. It's as I say, a place where people are seen for the person they are, not for the grade they are or the badge they have professionally and things like that. Those things are obviously they have meaning in an organisation, and it's not to kind of say that they're not relevant. But I think it's somewhere where people kind of like Caroline says, everybody has an equal chance to enjoy their work, to be heard and feel respected at work, and to feel that work is I guess is nourishing and rewarding for them as well. And can we achieve it? Well, we can if we want to, because we all shape the organization. We are the culture of the organization, so every one of us. And so I guess it's about how we set our stall out in that respect, isn't it? And I think that's why through the Culture Collaborative, for example, we're really keen to explore the values and help people to understand what does that mean in terms of behaviours and ways of doing things. And we're keen to break down some of those barriers that stop people feeling that they can have a voice or speak up, because it's giving people that sense of safety that will really hopefully make a bit of a difference in that respect. So that's I guess where I'm coming from. If I'm using the word egalitarian, everybody's got a kind of chance to get on.
Thanks for the confession there about it being on your LinkedIn profile, Tom. Can I just add a couple of things to that, Mike? So
sure.
can we achieve it? So other organisations have, and that's the work that we are doing using an evidence base of so how did they get there. The word of warning I would put across that is it's not a journey to an end point. However, culture and how we behave as an organisation moves all the time. So as Tom says, it's about understanding what are the behavioural expectations, what are the values, and how do we know when those are being met and not being met, and how do we create the psychological safety to actually uh, speak to those colleagues who are, for whatever reason on that day, not able to live by those values and demonstrate those behaviours, rather than just letting it go and it becomes a bigger problem. So I think that's really important. This is something that will always have to we will always have to pay attention to how the organic nature of the culture works, and so that's really really important. for us to continue to stay focused on.
Okie dokie. So the second question it's actually one that came up in last week's Q&A, Tom. It's somebody that asked about expenses. They made the point anonymously that the expenses that we claim on our payslip through our payslips is charged tax and deductions such as national insurance. The point they made was that it seemed unfair to be paying tax twice on things that we claim expenses for, such as petrol or training courses, on top of the initial tax that we pay at the point we're paid. Caroline wasn't sure last week whether that was anything that was within our remit to do anything about, but suspected it was maybe a UK government level thing. I just wondered if you had any clarity on that, Tom, or could it offer any insight?
Well, the best technical answer probably would come through the previously discussed Ask Lorraine Q&A with Lorraine Hunter from our HR Service Centre, because she'll know this sort of stuff inside out. But I'll give you what my kind of understanding of it is. And I think the first thing to say is just because something appears in the pay column within a pay slip, say as an expense that's been claimed back, I don't think that automatically does mean that it's taxed at source. Certainly my own, it's been a while since I've claimed stuff because we've not been doing much in the way of travel for work over the last couple of years or anything like that. But in my previous NHS role, where I did do quite a lot of traveling around the country because it was a national role, certainly some of the expenses there were not taxed if you paid them out of your own pocket to claim back. So as I say, I wouldn't necessarily, my own understanding is that just because it appears in that column doesn't mean it's automatically taxed. That there will be categories of expenses or costs incurred in the course of work that may have a tax attached to them, and that will be set, as you've kind of alluded to there, Mike, in accordance with HMRC guidelines and rules. I guess obviously there are some income tax powers now devolved to Scottish Government, so there'll be a national Scottish position on that too. The best way to get advice on these things is to be contacting the HR Service Centre, looking at their pages on the intranet and looking at the relevant policies around reimbursement of expenses, because that will be clear on what is, whether there are particular mileage rate allowances that are subject to a tax, for example, versus those that aren't. But as I say, it will depend on the nature of each expense, I think. So that's my understanding of it. And as I say, there's a wealth of information on the internet for colleagues if they want to have a look at that.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Tom. The next question comes from Anne Noble. Anne asks if retention, particularly of nurses, is one of our organisational priorities. Why are the vast majority of posts still only advertised as full-time? Another colleague on this has been in touch on this theme and mentions that she sees so few posts advertised as part-time. She feels that with the issues with vacancy numbers, that we should be doing more to tap into the people who don't want to work on the bank or work full-time, sure, but would find part-time working attractive. I don't know, Tom, Caroline, who would want to address that one? Tom?
I'm happy to start. Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks very much for the question, Anne, and colleague as well. I think first thing to say actually is our workforce, according to the latest workforce plan we have, overall is about just under, very slightly under 50% work part-time. And I guess the biggest group of staff within our workforce is nursing staff as well. So one might infer from that there's a fair chunk of nursing staff who work part-time as well as full-time. In terms of the recruitment or advertising of posts as part-time, I guess recruitment are guided by what the hiring manager is indicating at the kind of hours for the job. And a lot of posts will be full-time because maybe somebody's left who'd been working full-time. That doesn't mean that there won't be an openness to a conversation about whether the work could be done part-time, whether there's a job share opportunity, things like that. But there's always always a contact or an informal contact listed within the advert, and I would encourage colleagues like Anne to speak with the contact and see what might be possible. Clearly, if somebody's wanting to work part-time, we would want to try and accommodate that. We want to have as many experienced, skilled and well-qualified people in the organisation as we can get. But of course, that has to balance with what's the sort of the pattern and the way in which work's organised, and do the individual's needs and expectations around what they would like to work and are they able to be kind of aligned to what the service needs in order to sustain itself and to deliver outcomes. But I think it's the basis of understanding that is a conversation with the person who's the hiring manager, because as I say, I don't think we would want people to feel that they've got no opportunity to work part-time on the basis of the job being, I guess, a full-time gap that needs filled,
Okay, thank you. Unless you want to come in, Caroline, I'll move on to the next question.
So I just want to say one
time.
thing which I think is really important. So and agree with everything that Tom has said. But there is as we think in our plan for the future and prioritise, thing that came through loud and clear from iMatter, from Culture Matters work. What you tell us all the time is having the right workforce is the thing that matters most at the moment, and that's true. So what does that need to look like in future years? And I think generationally there is a difference in what people want now. So if I think of my adult children, the focus on work-life balance is really, really important. And I think we've taught them everything we possibly could about how not to achieve a work-life balance sometimes. And they are addressing that in the way that a generational movement happens. So for me, and if I look at particularly nursing and my knowledge of that, and in areas like Australia, actually what becomes the norm for the next generation of working practice. And I don't think our traditional approach to full-time work is the future. I think many more people want to do a combination of jobs and want to ensure that they have a work and life balance in a different way. So I know that Tom and colleagues are working on what does the future look like, and that would pick up on some of that work. So what we know now is not what we need for the future.
Okie dokie, thank you, Caroline. The next question comes from Sarah Cook, who is a colleague that's a physio. She has said essentially that given the recruitment issues that we're facing across most professions within NHS Grampian, she was in touch with recruitment to ask if they had a post that coordinated school and university recruitment fairs. As she'd felt it was always a very ad hoc arrangement. She mentioned she'd helped out voluntarily herself with some in her local area. She was told that such a post had been proposed, but it wasn't supported. Sarah feels that it's very short-sighted and wondered what your view might be and whether it should be something that we perhaps revisit. I don't know, is that one maybe, Tom?
Yeah, I can take that. I guess recruitment sits under my my leadership, as well as some of the stuff around employability as well. So, and Sarah, it's a good question and challenge to put up. So I guess there isn't a dedicated post within recruitment. I don't know the backstory to the particular circumstance that's been relayed there, but there is actually a post with a guy called Douglas Andrew working in it, which is a learning and development manager for employability and apprenticeships. And Douglas is actually very proactive and well connected into schools, further education institutions across Grampian, and including Aberdeen City, Aberdeenshire, and Moray as well. And it's not just limited to things like apprenticeships and to sort of those things for school leavers, but also provides access to schools for schools to resources, but also visits from staff in NHS Grampian to do talks with children in the schools and try and kind of really engage at all levels actually of the education journey and help children to understand the opportunities that might be available to them to come and work in health and care. I know this because I had direct benefit from Douglas and team's support last year when we had colleagues go into my son's P1 class. But I also know that there was in that same period of time a colleague who'd gone directly into the school as a parent and done a presentation as well, and that's great. And we would want to kind of encourage as much promotion of careers in health as care as possible. But if people link in with Douglas and team, then they can access the latest resources, the latest information, even things like the mini nurses uniforms for kids, which is a bit of fun, but a good way of kind of helping them to understand the opportunities in health and care, so we can make sure people have got the latest information and material to work with. So there may not be a post in recruitment, but actually the work really here is around it's a bit broader than just recruitment. It's the kind of attraction piece and building relationships with education providers. And we also have had a visible presence at the sort of National Skills Scotland event over the last few years as well, which is schools really plug into as a means of kind of, I guess, particularly as kids are getting towards school leave age, helping them to understand the range of opportunities that may be available.
Okay, thank you. That's really helpful to
Mike,
know. And we
can I just jump in around that? So I suppose that the bit of intel for us from this is most, and back to that former bit about people trying to work their way through this system, most people would think to go to the recruitment team to understand that. And if the recruitment team aren't aware of Douglas in that role, to be able to signpost them. So I wonder if there is just a thing that we need to do there around, doesn't sit within recruitment, but here's the person that you need to have the conversation with and make that connection in that way. So I wonder if there's something we just need to double check is in place.
Yeah, we can make that connection. That's a good suggestion, Caroline. Thanks.
All right. The next one's from Alice Ritchie, who's a clinical nurse manager. She's asked what your thoughts are on the complexities of JobTrain. She mentioned she finds the system isn't straightforward, often results in errors and subsequent delays in the recruitment process. She also says that she knows that this isn't isolated to her area, and because other managers have told her about their frustrations with it. And she mentions, obviously, in a time when workforce is finite, and she would like to know whether the system is being looked at to see what support or changes could be made. I think that probably does sit with Tom as well, does it?
Yeah, most likely, Mike. So I suppose the first thing to say is that the JobTrain system's still at a fairly early stage. It's been in the last couple of years or so, and during a time of real extreme pressure for everybody, hasn't it? So those using the system have probably had less time to explore it and work with it, and maybe those working to sort of develop it and enhance it have been a bit stretched in that respect as well. I know that the JobTrain team nationally are keen to kind of make improvements and get feedback, and our recruitment team here are happy to support colleagues as well in using the system. There are standard operating procedures and videos online, but colleagues in the recruitment department will help people to navigate their way through it as well if they're encountering a particular challenge. What we're trying to do, though, is use the functionality that JobTrain has, a bit more of the functionality to do things like bulk recruitment. And create talent pools so that people aren't having to go through repeat applications for similar vacancies, but also for hiring managers, they're not having to run their way through multiple vacancies, but can actually recruit from a pool or through a bulk process. And certainly the early indications from that being tested in relation to healthcare support worker recruitment, I think, are quite positive. It is hopefully freeing up time of colleagues with clinical responsibilities or caring responsibilities for providing direct care to do more of that and less of the recruitment admin, I guess, that comes with having, say, several vacancies open at once. It does require a bit of a change in perspective on how we recruit, because it means sharing a little bit more the pool of people who are out there, and also the responsibility for selecting and trusting others to make the right sort of judgment calls as well. But hopefully the benefit of that will be that people will start, will get some time back and start to see what the system can do or can enable in ways that previous processes and technology weren't so well suited to. So, I think we all know that there's work still to do in sort of getting JobTrain really finessed, but it's in now, and as I say, the national team are keen to get feedback and to try and address issues where they're common to a lot of users. So please contact the recruitment team, I guess, would be the message if you are struggling with using it. But we are looking at using it in more creative ways to reduce some of those administrative burdens on hiring managers in particular.
Okay, thank you again, Tom, for that answer. That's really helpful. The next question comes from an anonymous dental nursing colleague. they mentioned, Caroline, that they'd been listening to, I think it was the previous Q&A that you did with June Brown, where you talked about the topic of career development for healthcare support workers. What she's asked is if there's anything in the pipeline to look at the development for dental nurses. She said that since the original agenda for change, she's not aware that these roles have really been looked into, and there's been a lot of changes since in the last 17 years, including in 2008, all dental nurses had to register with the General Dental Council. I don't know if Caroline or Tom are aware of any work ongoing to look at dental nursing specifically.
So I'm not aware of anything. I think it's a really good question, and it's actually prompted in my mind. So the regulator for dental nurses, as you say, is the General Dental Council, as opposed to the Nursing and Midwifery Council. So for colleagues that aren't really close to that, it's a very different regulatory framework. So I think it's a good question, really important that we're developing all of our colleagues, irrespective of job role. But I think unless Tom knows something, June might be the first point of contact to say, is she doing anything specific around that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably as good an answer as I could give Caroline. I'm not aware of anything specific, and I wonder if it's June and or even Jonathan, a lawyer as well, around dental profession. That's worth having a conversation with on this one.
Okay, I can try and put the person in touch with them. There's a couple of other questions about the healthcare support worker pay banding review that's ongoing. I wasn't entirely sure, Tom. I know June Brown is leading on that work. Are those things that we maybe should direct to June, or do you want me to put them to you just now?
I'm happy to try and provide an initial answer to any questions in the interest of getting colleagues some information, and then if June feels it's helpful to kind of add anything to that, I'm sure she'll be looking at this anyway, so she can offer anything more that's helpful on the back of that.
Okay. One of our healthcare support worker colleagues has been in touch asking if phlebotomists who are currently band 2 can be included in the banding reviews that have been mentioned for healthcare support workers. I'm not sure if either of you will actually be aware if that's already the case or if that would be a new change.
So the work that's ongoing at the moment nationally is as a result of an agreement by, a request from the National NHS Management Steering Group of the Scottish Terms and Conditions Committee to I guess establish two levels of I guess job description, job profile for clinical healthcare support workers in nursing and midwifery, and that's a band 2 and a band 3 profile. And for boards to then be asked to undertake an assessment, I guess, of current roles relative to those two profiles. And that reflects the fact, I think, that, over time, post the introduction of healthcare support worker roles at band 2, there has been a recognition that in some cases, people have actually been undertaking work that has kind of stretched the boundaries of that to a point where actually the work is more akin to a band 3. I'm not aware of phlebotomists having been included in that exercise, which was kind of quite bounded and well defined in terms of what boards have been asked to do. I guess there are a couple of ways in which that can be raised. One is for it to be raised sort of through the national channels, and through professional groups and professional staff groups. The other way is that if anybody feels in the organisation that their role, I guess the role they are doing, has changed to such an extent that actually they're doing something that is at a different level from what they were hired to do, or a different level of complexity or different level of responsibility, for example, they can request individually or collectively for that to be looked at and to be reevaluated. And there's advice available on that through the HR hub and through the relevant policies, but also staff side colleagues would also have understanding and insight into those processes as well. And so that's another option if people feel, if an individual feels or a group of individuals feel that their job has changed significantly from the job description and I guess the banding assessment that was originally made of it, to ask for that to be looked at again.
Okay, thanks, Tom. And the second question, I think some of the advice that you've just given there about how to have some of those issues looked at might apply here. It was actually from a couple of colleagues who mentioned the different role that Band 2 healthcare support workers have in our community hospitals with different types of responsibilities. And the question essentially was, do we think it's fair that they're paid the same as colleagues elsewhere in the system? I don't know, I think maybe what you said there, Tom, would cover some of those things, unless anybody wants to add anything in particular.
No, I think that sounds very much like the circumstances that the Band 2, 3 work that June is leading and HR colleagues are supporting is designed to, I guess, work through and ensure that people are banded according to the nature of the work and the level of responsibility and complexity associated with the work they're doing.
Okay, thank you. I'm conscious of your time, and I know we've kind of extended this ever so slightly to try and get through as many questions as possible, but I'll just ask one final one today. This is on pensions, Tom. It's not on pensions, sorry. It's on retired nurses returning to NHS Grampian during the pandemic. The person mentions that people committed to staying on by accepting contract offers with pension benefits involved that would be extended until October. The colleagues concerned that many people may choose to leave or reduce hours at that point. And they've asked specifically, is there any update on what NHS Grampian plans to do to resolve this issue, or is there any contingency in place in case a large number of people do decide to leave when that happens at the end of October? Is that something you are around, Tom?
Not closely, but what I guess I can share is that the provisions around, I guess, preferential pension position for those returning to the service who had previously retired are part of a national set of policies that were implemented in response to the pandemic, and which are being kind of wound down at the request of Scottish Government and in agreement with both trade unions and I guess management side colleagues this year. And so that one that's being described there is one of those that will come to an end at the end of October. Now, that may well present a risk for us in terms of some people feeling, well, maybe now's the time to either reduce the hours or just step back into retirement and away from the workplace. I would hope people would, want to stay, and the pension wouldn't be the only consideration in relation to that. But I think with nursing colleagues, we probably need to understand a little bit better the degree of risk that may involve. But at a national level, an interim retire and return sort of set of guidelines and approach is being developed, which actually builds on something we put in place ourselves in NHS Grampian to support colleagues who have taken the option of retiring to return relatively easily, subject to the role being there to do so, to the role that they actually retired from, without maybe some of the previous complexities associated with that. So we're hoping at a national level and here in Grampian that will help to mitigate some of the risk, because for colleagues who are coming up to retirement age, for example, there'll be less barriers to wishing to take their pensions, but not necessarily to retire, because they're two different things. That there will be less barriers to them continuing to work with us beyond that point, and whether that's in the role that they've been in or indeed to be exploring other roles as well. So that guidance, I saw a draft of it last week, and we've given feedback and comment on it. I think the intention as part of the Ones for Scotland policies programme is for that to be out pretty soon, pending a broader sort of piece of work on the retirement policy that is due to kind of be progressed over the coming months.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you both very much for your time today. I know there are quite a few questions we need to get to. As I said at the start, some are quite specific to people, so we'll get answers and reply to them directly. There's a few that would apply to a broader staff group that will include an update with some links in the brief. the key theme that we haven't mentioned today is obviously there's a lot of anxiety about the pay deal, the agenda for change pay deal. I know, Tom, you put an update on last Monday in the brief, which was really helpful, just updating on that position. So I haven't actually asked those questions. There is also a number of questions about how we could potentially encourage people to access the bank. How do people get on the bank? Is it accepting shifts just now, which I think we could maybe include a brief update on as well. So I'll work through that with both of you off camera. But again, just to say thank you very much for your time. Unless anybody wants to add anything before we go, I will say goodbye.
Thanks very much, Mike,
Tom.
and thanks for all the questions, folks. And I hope the answers have been helpful, and we can provide some more in written format going forward.
Thank you. Cheers.